Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. On my last outing with my telescopes, I realized I had never really optimized my flat sequences. I have an automated routine using the Flat Wizard in Nina, but it's not like the fastest it could be. So anybody that does flats, you want to get through the process quick. So this video is going to be about optimizing the automated flat sequence using a light panel that has the ability for Nina to control the brightness. In this particular case, I'm using the PrimaLuce Giotto automated light panel. I really like this panel. I used to use a motorized unit, but what I found was dew would collect on the panel. Also, there's the extra weight of the motorized unit on the front of the scope. Depending on if it opens all the way or not, you could get reflections off of the panel. The other nice thing about this particular panel is you can add a motorized unit to it, folds all the way back. So if you have a remote observatory configuration, this panel is optimal for either situation. I like to just go out and put the flat panel on without having all that dew on it, and then run the sequence. So I'm going to show how to do a sequence in Nina. So we'll fully automate flats and dark flats and do it in the least amount of time. We're looking at my smaller telescope configuration. The things you want to do before you run your flats is on the night of the shoot or the morning after the shoot, you want to make sure your camera is still at the temperature it was when you did your shoot. I'm currently cooling this one down to -20, which is what I run my 1600 mm Pro. You also want to make sure that your dew shield on, if in this case it's a refractor, if you have an extendable dew shield, you always want that in the same position. And in terms of the light panel itself, if you're doing dark flats, you just want to make sure one that seals the end of the telescope fairly well. The PrimaLuces have a rim around them, so it blocks out. And I'm shooting at night still, in the early morning, right before the sun comes up. So I'm also assuming, doesn't matter so much for flats, that the configuration has offset filters settings for Nina. So anytime it's changing the filter, it's changing the focal point, the autofocus setting to match the offset. All right, we're at temperature. I'll go to the Flat Wizard. At the moment, I'm gonna run one at a time here on this multi-mode. Okay, for this panel, you're going to want to use dynamic brightness. That'll allow Nina to control the brightness and try to match the amount of time that you're requesting. I recommend a histogram mean of 1/3. Just put this at 33%. Tolerance, I typically go with 5% exposure time. Some weird stuff can happen when you take really short exposures on flats with some cameras. For the luminance, it's going to not take very much brightness at all. So we're going to start with 1 to 10. All right, let's run this. I like to try a half second on this luminance. It's super sensitive. Running it, setting it to 8, starting with 8. It's happy. I go back to here. 8 brightness worked for half a second. I come back to the panel. So knowing that 8 worked, what I like to do is take that plus and minus like 5 or 10. So in this case, we'll make this 3 -5 on this luminance, and 13 for max. It's going to pick the middle of those when it starts. So it should start with 8, but it gives us some range for some reason things aren't quite the same that night. It'll have a little bit of room to move. Now, when I hit it this time, this will be more apparent on other filters. When I hit it this time, it'll start with 8. It'll find it immediately. It's the right level, and it'll take the flat. So now this one is optimized for all the settings. Next, we're going to do our, let's see, we want to do probably, we're going to find out, minimum is going to always be at least 1. I'm going to go down to a 1 second exposure, go to 20 on the range. Okay, found it at 15. I go back to the equipment, it's got 15 trained in here. And these numbers you'll see will come in handy for the sequencer later. Go back to the Flat Wizard. Now I'm going to take 15, max plus 5, be 20 for max, -5, 10 for the bottom. That will start it off at 15. If I hit it one more time, we will see it won't need to do a bunch of iterations to figure it out. It's going to be right on it. First try. Super fast. All right, so knowing these settings, okay, I'm going to do this for green and blue, and then I'll come back. Green ended up being 16. I've subtracted 5 on each side for that. Blue ended up being 14. I subtracted 5 for minimum, added 5 for the maximum for that. Okay, hydrogen. These are going to take more light. I'm running 7 nanometers, so it's not quite as narrow as my other scope. Obviously, it's going to take a lot more light. So we're going to start off with 10. So let's try for a 1 second exposure. Probably going to take more brightness. Let's go higher. Still going with 5%. Let's turn on the right filter. It's not going to take as much. 50. All right, for the narrow bands, because there's a lot higher setting here, I like to give it a little more room. So at 50, I'd subtract 10 instead of 5. So this would be 40 up in 50 plus 10, it'll be 60. And then let me run one more. See it lock in on that on first try. It did. Trained at 50. All right, so I'm going to do this for the other 2 filters, and then I'll come back. All right, so we have all of these set. Ended up being 50, 47, 54, plus 10, minus 10 on the ranges for each of those. So now I have a train set. And if you were out there by yourself, you could say, okay, I'm going to run 50 flats, 50 darks in multi-mode, and you could hit go, and it would run through that, but it would prompt you halfway through. It would do all the flats, and then it would ask you to make sure the telescope's covered to do the dark flats. Those of you who have motorized units for your panels, you wouldn't want to be out there at all. So the next thing you would do is in a sequence, and sequencer, you can add this to an end sequence. Obviously you could do your open flat panel cover if you're doing automated. I'm just going to put that in here just for fun. So I would put in this trained flat exposure. So you could put in the auto brightness flat, do what we just did on the flat wizard, and put in all the settings and run it through. But now that we have this trained set over here in the sequence, I can just say I want 50 of L. You would want this on if you're using a flat panel cover, and it's going to run all those. I would do a copy of this, make a copy for every filter, and then all you have to do is change this to filters that you have. And then when you save this template, you can just delete the filters you're not going to run for that night in your sequence. So say you're doing LRGB, you could just delete these 4. This is actually not supposed to be on there. This would be a close panel cover, and it would be an open at the end if you're using a motorized unit. So the other thing you can do is darks, and they have another one, trained dark exposure, and it will look up for the various filters. You could put these at the bottom and run a sequence, but you make it even faster. What you want to do is put the trained dark after each one, and you put in your 50 and your L for you, so it doesn't have to switch filters. It could just run the flats for the L, turn off the light, run all the 50 darks, then switch filter even faster. So I'm going to go ahead and copy and put these in here. I'll be back in a second. All right, so now we have the sequence built to run. This will theoretically take less than 10 minutes or something like that. I'm going to remove these. I'm going to save this sequence for myself as my flat sequence. And I like to put my scope type and my camera type on here. Save that. And I'm going to run it. Let's see how long it takes it. So theoretically, it's trained. It's going to take 6.5 seconds, which is 13 seconds, plus the time for it to switch filters and all that. Like what, 15 to 20 seconds to do the whole routine. 15 seconds times 50 divided by 60 seconds, 12.5 minutes. So it's going to be less than 15 minutes to do both the flats and the dark flats, 50 of each, for an entire filter set. That was if I run LRGB, HOS. So if we're running just LRGB, they're going to be like, call it 5 seconds, 3.5 seconds plus a little overage for switching. We call that 5 seconds for dual set, 10 seconds times 50 divided by 60 seconds, It was like less than 10 minutes. Like that is like extremely fast for flats, for a good solid set of flats. And it's finished. So notice how when we have it in a sequence, it doesn't prompt you to go to the computer and hit OK, which I was doing on my phone before I built a sequence. We go look at the flat set. It did them all. And there's a half second, 1 second each for all those. And on the dark flats, you have half second, 1 second each. So it worked well. And you want to check your flats in PixInsight. Make sure that you're getting the quality that you need. In some cases, you may need to target a little bit higher exposure time to get an optimal flat. So that's a wrap for this episode. Hope everybody found this useful. You can add that to your sequences or just run the separate sequence and trim down the time for your automated flats. Until next time, thanks for watching. Clear skies. Take care.